let's see. So I saw, so there was this, okay? A little while, like a couple years ago, Rogan made this tweet, content creator. Her name's Frogan, Muslim American content creator. She's Lebanese, if I remember correctly. Anyways, she made this tweet on the Bird app. I went to therapy for the first time after talking about my dad fleeing the Israel-Lebanon war. She was like, I'm Israeli. Do you have any issues with me being your therapist? Bruh, I was so taken aback. My mom told me I should switch because that wasn't professional. What are your thoughts on this? Because I'm genuinely so conflicted right now. Okay. And also the creator Stardust. I don't believe she likes I don't believe she likes this Frogan character. So she made this tweet about the apparent inconsistencies in Frogan's tweets, okay? So there was this from 2016, I miss my old therapist, okay? And then from February 2019, she was like, I started therapy a few years back and I was uncomfortable with my therapist being Muslim and the thought of that because I didn't want her to judge me. But she was the best person I ever met. It's important to have mental health workers that understand your culture and religion. And then it was this tweet about her therapist bringing up that the fact that they were Israeli. Okay? Bring up the fact that they were Israeli. So, can I say something really quick, okay? Here's one thing. I've heard people say that Frogan called her therapist a Zionist, and I'm not necessarily sure when she said that. Was it on Twitter? Was it on her stream? Does anyone know? Does anybody have a clip of that? Because I haven't been able to see that. Yes, Twitter. Not this tweet. Before this one. Before this tweet. Because Ethan is here responding to her, saying that she called her therapist a Zionist specifically. Okay, so she started to like her therapist a little more. Linked right under. No, this is the original tweet where the word Zionist is not used once by her. Unless I'm misreading it. No, the word Zionist here isn't used once. So maybe at some other point in time. No audio? I'm not playing the clip right now. Or what, can you not hear me? No, you can hear me. Test 1, 2. There's another tweet. There is another. Give me a sec. Okay, let me see. Let's go through her Twitter to see if we can find anything. Let's see. Let's see. Would have been the last couple days, right? Oh, is this it? Yeah, here we go. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you. Oh, I actually had it. I don't know why I asked for it. I actually had it. Okay, never mind. So here's this. Started therapy 5 years after a bad experience with a Zionist therapist, okay? Sought women of color therapist assuming relative empathy, mentioned Palestine, and new therapist new therapist sees it as just another place and not caring or being knowledgeable due to discrimination she faces in America. Mentioned Palestine, and new therapist sees it as just another place and not caring or being knowledgeable due to discrimination she faces in America. Okay. So it seems like she wants to call this therapist a Zionist, the one that she had like a bad experience with. In my opinion, what it seems like, okay, is that she had a therapist a while ago, like an old therapist. I don't really think that it's the same therapist that she's talking about here, okay, with them being a Muslim therapist. They might be. There are still Muslim Israelis, okay, though they do exist. I'm not going to sit here and say that they don't exist. So Muslim Israelis do exist. So I guess there's no reason that this therapist could be Muslim and also not Israeli or like from Israel or something. And then she said that she went to therapy for the first time. And I think people are trying to say that she's lying. Well, what I've seen is that people say that she's lying by saying that she went to therapy for the first time when we have documented evidence of her going to therapy beforehand of this. But I think it could easily just mean that she's going to therapy for the first time with a new therapist or going to therapy for the first time in a while, because because I've gone to therapy before. I've only gone to like 2 sessions. But if I started therapy again, I would say that this is like, I would say this is my first time going to therapy. Or if I go to a new therapist, I'd probably, after I haven't done it in a while, I would probably phrase it as this is my first time going to therapy, right? Or if somebody says, what are you doing? And I'm going therapy for the first time, right? And it would be like implied in a while, or with a new therapist. That's not surprising to me personally, right? But I see people thinking that she's trying to like pull the wool over people's eyes by saying that this is the first time that she's ever been to therapy or something. I don't love Frogan, but these claims seem like a stretch to me. So that means Stardust is starting shit with his narrative? I don't know, maybe. What I like, she believes it. It seems like she definitely believes that she's like evil or like duplicitous woman or something along those lines. And I asked the question, like, from this, it seemed like she went to her therapist 3 years ago and then had a negative experience and then follow up with that experience. What's the inconsistency here? Because I wanted to know, like, what were people thinking that was an inconsistency? Because she's like the inconsistencies. Everybody's like, one more lie from the duplicitous mouth of this Frogan character. And I'm like, what am I missing? Right? And so there are some people in the comment section who are trying to explain to me why they feel like there are inconsistencies. And I got arguments like, I'm assuming it's the unprompted part. There was a prompt from the therapist. Okay. So coming back here, before we look at what Ethan said, let's read this tweet where she writes in a response to Ethan, where she said, when I said my therapist was a Zionist when I went back to her in 2019, I mean, she literally brought up that I was Lebanese unprompted and confronted me on it, saying that she was Israeli. She asked if I had a problem with that, if I felt like Israel had a right to exist, started asking more and more if I was frustrated with Islam and if I've considered taking off my hijab. I asked her if she was all right with me being Lebanese, and she got really aggressive, accusing me of flipping it on her and refused to answer. So when I say Zionist, I don't mean she was Jewish. I mean, she was a racist Israeli who could not help herself but confront me about my ethnicity and what was supposed to be a therapist session. And I'm going to say one thing real quick. Being a racist Israeli, it does not mean you're a Zionist, right? You could just be racist, right? you may, I mean, it's possible that you could just not even, there are Jews out there and like scholarly Jews out there who study Judaism who still don't believe in like the like the idea of like a Jewish ethno state existing while also still having racist attitudes, right? So like I still believe this is an improper use of the word Zionist, which can cause a lot of problems for other people, which can cause problems for people like reading your tweets. Because a loose use of the word Zionist is usually used by people who have pretty poor views on pretty poor views on Jewish people, and who like to use that. So I can see where people are coming from when you use a loose term, when you use a Zionism loosely. With that being said, when she says, because people are bringing up this part, okay. I mean, she literally brought up that I was Lebanese unprompted and confronted me, saying that she was Israeli. I want to highlight this part right here because it seems like this is a really important part for people. Now, what this could mean is that I see a lot of people saying is that she's lying. Okay, there was a prompt brought up by by herself, right, Frogan. Okay, and that prompt would be specifically her being like, I was talking about my dad after talking about my dad fleeing the Israel-Lebanon war. All right. So yeah, here we go. So this was what people would say would be the prompt for her being like, I'm Lebanese. I'm Israeli. Do you have a problem with me being your therapist? Right. Because some people are colorblind as fuck. So we'll do like purple. I don't know. Maybe some colorblind people still can't see that shit. This might actually be worse. Some people here are afflicted with colorblind. So, yellow? Yeah. They'll probably have an easy time reading that. Those blind. Anyways, so they would say this would be the prompt for her responding with this. While this, I feel like this could be true, how that would be the prompt. For me personally, in my experience after going to therapy, I would feel like it'd be a little weird for my therapist to bring something up like that after bringing up my personal experience that I want them, that I'm just talking through or wanting them to respond to in some way. Like if I was talking about how I had experienced like a racist incident, like somebody was racist to me online or something, and then my therapist was like, "Hey, I'm white. Do you have a problem with me being your therapist?" I'd be like, "Huh?" I'd be like, "Dog, what?" I'd be like, "So I was pushing the shopping cart in Kroger, and then the guy behind me in the deli section was like, 'F you, N-word,' and then kicked my cart, and I dropped my case of like free range eggs, and I started to cry, and they were like, 'Well, I'm white. Do you have a problem with me being white and your therapist?' Not only would if I'm putting myself in this situation, I'd be like, that was like, I'm not talking about you, man. And also, like, why would you just assume that I have a problem with you being my therapist just because you're white or something, right? I guess this could be something that could come up at a different time, possibly. But I feel like it's justified for someone to be a little taken aback by something like that. You making an assumption that they might have a problem could be demeaning in that way. And people are saying that this is a confirmation that they were right, that she does have a problem with her therapist being Israeli, which I haven't really seen, right? I haven't really seen that she specifically would have a problem with her therapist or people that she works with being Israeli or Jewish or whatever, right? Once again, it's just a massive assumption here from people who seem to just really hate her, right? I don't really have many opinions on Frogan personally. It's important for therapists to help figure out if you're a good match. Now, maybe being like, I'm not sure if I'm like the best person to help you with this, right? Because of my personal experience, I might not be able to empathize with you as much because of my personal background. But I don't know, the way that she said it, like, "I'm Israeli. Do you have issues with me being your therapist?" Like, sure, it's upfront, but I mean, I can understand how people would feel taken aback. And she seems like she didn't even necessarily know how to feel in this moment, right? It seemed like she later came to the conclusion that it was bad and wrong, and she didn't like it, right? And then later she came out with this. Started therapy 5 years after a bad experience with a Zionist therapist. Sought a woman of color therapist for empathy, and then that didn't work either. Okay, yeah, I think, right. So here's another thing that I've seen when it comes to this conversation. And so this is the original tweet, and then this is the follow up. This is the follow up tweet. Okay, where she for the first time called this therapist a Zionist. Okay, and then this is the follow up to Ethan's comments to her, where then she laid out a bunch of other grievances that she had with this therapist here. Okay, where she asked if I had a problem with that. She asked if I felt Israel had a right to exist, which seemed, I don't know, feels a little bit like a weird question, but you know, we're not privy to the conversation going on here. This is just her interpretation of what was happening. Her, like, after the first question, she could already be like set off and think poorly of everything else that the therapist had to say there. I don't know. I wasn't in the room. Nobody else was either. So this is just these are just inferences people are pulling based on whether they want to assume the worst out of her because they hate her and she's evil and stinky, or if they love her and she must be defended at all costs. But yeah, I just have no clue, personally. So I don't know. I guess that question could possibly come up in a conversation about you being Lebanese or whatever. Started asking more and more if I was frustrated with how I am frustrated with Islam and if I have ever considered taking off my hijab. I asked if me being Lebanese was a problem, and she got really aggressive. Now, I see a lot of people who say her bringing up this information here is simply a deflection to try to make herself look better. But if I'm going to be honest with you, with this first set of tweets, this was, as far as I remember, this was before she became a content creator. This is before she became a content creator. So this is her just being a like a normal citizen, just a random person online who loves House on Pecker, who's just tweeting to her relatively small group of people on her Twitter account, right? So it's obvious. I can honestly see how somebody may not want to bring up literally every single specific aspect in a tweet. I don't bring that up either when I talk about things that are happening. I don't bring up literally everything in a tweet, right? And then she was like, "How do you feel about this?" This seemed like the statement that she was most upset with, right? Is Froggen still a Hassan mod? No clue. I don't really care either. But you can probably find it out. You can probably find it out. Probably talked about it at some point. I've never really watched Hassan. So yeah. So there's that. I don't know. I personally feel like none of these arguments are really none of these arguments really stick to me, but we can look at some more because I haven't read all of these. Couldn't the unprompted thing be from another session? Like you mention it in one session and then later the therapist brings it up unprompted. That's also possible. There is a possibility. Bring some shadow of doubt onto this onto people who say that they don't like her or think there are inconsistencies. The 2019 therapist is probably the same one, and the stories don't line up. Well, they said probably the same one, but I'm not sure if that's true. Maybe the same one. Maybe it's possible. But if that was the case, then the people saying that she's anti-Jewish have an even smaller, have like a worse leg to stand on, because that therapist originally was Muslim and not Jewish. Specifically, she talked about this therapist being actually it's up here. She talked about this therapist being a Muslim therapist. Went to started therapy a few years back, and my therapist being Muslim, I was uncomfortable, right, but I realized that they were a great person. So this therapist here, if this therapist from 2019 and this therapist that she said was a Zionist apparently, are the same person, then the people who say that she's like anti-Jewish or something or anti-Semitic, it'd be harder to be able to say that because the person's Muslim. Actually, you might be able to say anti-Israeli, but then that wouldn't be anti-Jewish. Right? It'd be something completely different. Actually, the stories don't line up. I'm not sure how the stories don't line up though. The first one is hers clearly talking about her father's experience in the Israel-Lebanon war, and the therapist trying to empathize since she is Israeli and she doesn't know if that's a problem. Her being like, I might be from like, in her mind, the oppressor group, and I might not be like the best person to work with you here. Sure. I mean, maybe. I guess that's possible. Still don't know what Ethan even said. Well, we're talking about like the conversation before Ethan jumped in right now. And because when we hit up what Ethan said, then I want to go on with like the back and forth, what people said with Ethan, to Ethan, all that type of stuff. Okay. Yeah. I'm just letting you know like the structure that I want to put in here, because I don't want to jump to like what, because right now this is the conversation around what other people had to say about this. But when I want to jump to Ethan and the other stuff that Ethan said, we're going to have to continue with what Ethan said, because there's like more to watch with that. And I don't think there'd be a real way to like come back into this. So I think I think it'd be better to deal with this now. That's just my opinion. Yeah, we just haven't gotten to it yet. We're working on the community response right now. The second one, therapists bring up unprompted, which is contradictory. Declare they're two different therapists. I feel like they seem like two different therapists personally, but okay. 2019, I spoke about my dad's experience. She asked me if it's okay having an Israeli therapist. 2024, she was like, "You're Lebanese and I'm Israeli. You got a problem with that?" This actually isn't true, because she said this line actually was back in 2019 right here. So she quoted this from back in the day. So that's actually incorrect about that being from 2024. Her statements from yesterday, she claimed Lebanon statements was brought up by the therapist unprompted. The tweet from a few years ago seems to contradict that claim. That telling someone to take off your hijab probably, I mean, you would think that telling someone to take off their hijab probably would have come up before. The saying later on Lebanese thing was okay. It seemed like the biggest thing is it being unprompted that people seem to have a big problem with. I don't really see it like that, but I guess I can sure, I guess. It doesn't seem really that big though, compared to like the other statements. But you might not think that those statements are real or something, that she's trying to get one over on people. or get extra sympathy by lying. I don't really feel like I feel a reason for why Frogan would lie that hard about this type of stuff, but you know, other people do. Also had 5 therapists so far. She might miss another therapist. Also, I've had 5 therapists so far. Miss another therapist. It could be another therapist. There have been multiple therapists, right? Like I've had 1 therapy session. I probably won't be going back to the same therapist because they're on a service that I don't really want to use anymore. How could she both start therapy a few years back in 2019 and also do it for the first time in 2019? How is that consistent? Yeah, I think we covered this, but I think I can see how people could mean like starting and then in parentheses if it was written like with a new therapist or for the first time, right? People usually talk like that when they're talking, when they think that you have prior information. I don't want to explain literally every instance of your whole life on Twitter, especially before you're a content creator. With that being said, okay, with this tweet coming back, and this tweet coming back where she specifically called the therapist a Zionist, Ethan, who seems to still be watching her account, or somebody brought it to his attention, maybe on the subreddit or something, then commented on that and commented on how it's incorrect and wrong and probably anti-Semitic for her to be using the term Zionist in this way. Let's take a look.
I'm going to say this because it pissed me the fuck off. I'm going to say this because it pissed me the fuck off. And being an anti-Semite openly and proudly is now likes on Twitter. Frogan, she tweeted out, she goes, I have a problem with my Zionist therapist. Just call him a fucking Jew. I'm sorry, but you can't talk like that about any other minority. I had a problem with my Zionist therapist. What you taught your Zionist therapist? Did you get those level of details from them? You had an in-depth conversation about the politics of Zionism with your therapist? No, I know what you mean. You mean Jew. You know, I'm not going to sit here and let my people, you know, be openly bigoted and racist. That shit. Nobody would expect that from any other minority. Nobody. It's disgusting. It is. And I'm here. I'm with you. I'm going to say.
Okay. It's true. Not all Jews are Zionists, but here's something that you got to understand. Okay. There are bad people who use the word Zionist, but what they mean is Jew. Okay. There's no, like, we all, for one, you need to understand that. Okay. If you can understand how Fox News says thug and what you obviously know is as a dog whistle for meaning black, okay, you can understand how some people use Zionist and what they mean is Jew. Let's just be honest. Now, that's not in question. What's in question is Frogan doing that specifically. And I brought this up earlier. My problem was that I feel like she uses the word a little loosely, right? But what it means, like what she means, is that you are Israeli. You are Israeli, or you have beliefs that are pro-Israeli to the detriment of like Muslims and Arabs. Okay, it seems like that's how she uses the word. That you are pro-Israel and Israeli, but also also have negative opinions of Arabs and Muslims. It seems like that's how she uses the word, which is not the like usually accepted way of how we would use the word Zionist, right? That's just not correct, because Zionist usually means that you believe in a Jewish ethno-state in the area of like in the area of like the biblically called Zion in Jerusalem. That was like in the religious term given to Jews by God in the secular way for Jewish protection against like anti-Semitism, and that's why they need their ethno-state, right? So that's not how you use the word. But like in a colloquial sense, I can understand how you use that word. But when you have but in such a strongly, but in like a time when feelings are running so strong, when even the word genocide is being thrown around right now, when you're a public speaker, you might want to be just like a little bit more careful. But obviously that will get into the idea of tone policing somebody whose family is directly being inflicted to suffering as like American-made bombs are literally dropping on their skulls right now, right? And so you got to do that little balancing act there. With that being said, I feel like Ethan goes a little crazy. He goes a little insane on this type of stuff. We watched as he was, we were specifically watching as he was calling like random people who is even calling him out for some views that he has on Palestinians, on the entire issue, on the war, possibility of genocide, all this type of stuff. How he was calling them pro-Hamas supporters. They should like go to Gaza to get killed by Hamas. That's what they would deserve if you love Hamas so much. And what they mean is, hey, you need to. I believe it would be better for you to change your language on like Gaza and Hamas, right? On like Gaza, Palestinians, in some ways even Hamas, possibly, right? Which I think is crazy, and we've seen that stuff before. Right? He had crazy reactions on Twitter. He still has wild reactions on like Instagram right now. Has he always been this reactionary? He's far less reactionary now than he was in the past. Like in the past, he was saying he was like slinging around the N-word, you know, for fun. So he's less reactionary now than he was previously, back during like the peak of the H3 days. So I will say that on this issue, I mean, we've talked about it before. So here's the thing: he's Jewish. He has family in Israel, from Israel. His wife is Israeli. Okay, so so when it comes to Frogan and Ethan, the thing that a lot of people don't want to come to terms with is that this is like really personal to both of them. Okay. If you tell somebody like get over like the possibility of your family getting like suicide bombed or something, that's not going to go over very well. Okay. They're going to be like, fuck you. And if you tell somebody to get over their family getting turned into atoms by US made bombs after doing literally nothing and being forced to live in an open air, in like an open air prison for decades. Okay. They're going to tell you fuck off. All right. It's obviously really difficult for both of them, but that obviously doesn't allow you to make claims about people that are incorrect in this instance. I think a lot of Ethan's views, in my personal opinion, after watching those leftover segments with Hassan, I think a lot of his views on these issues are actually pretty decent. All right. And you've seen it. You've seen me talk about this type of stuff. I even think that Ethan and Hassan aren't that far away when it comes to their views on these issues. The problem comes in with Ethan being able to pick out people who are and aren't anti-Semitic, and how he then deals with that and how he treats those types of people, especially when he's been wrong before. And he's been wrong before. And you can't just, in an age of ramping Islamophobia, you can't just call like random, you can't just be calling random like people and Arabs like anti-Semitic. You just can't do that. Okay? You just can't do that. There's the air of him being rich, punching down at people who are now having their families suffer throughout this type of war. And I don't think you should just throw on the word Zionist either, like Frogan's doing, because here's the problem, okay? It genuinely, like, in my personal opinion, it genuinely like dismisses how problematic that can be. It's literally the ideology of creating a giant ethno state. Shit's genuinely crazy, right? And per Ethan's words, he's technically not. Now, the closest thing that you could say would be like he's a Zionist sympathizer, possibly, like very, very possibly. But I think that's more loose. I think he's more like he sympathizes with the people who are living there and who have the possibility of being killed, right? More than anything else. He's been putting forth Zionist takes very frequently. If you believe so, I'd love to see it. I wanted to watch that Cavernacle video because I don't keep up with all these guys. What I'm talking about is just things that I saw when he was talking to, when he was doing his like, it's not Leftover, see you next Tuesday. I think his like subscriber only stream, and also when he was talking to Hassan, it seemed like they were pretty close on a lot of those issues. I didn't hear very much from Ethan that I think a lot of people would disagree with. I don't think Hassan even necessarily disagree with that much on those talks, but you know, we'll see. He's def a Zionist though. He literally makes Zionist arguments. Sure. Wait, here. Your boy Hiku, does Cavernacle in his video bring up Ethan's Zionist talking points? I want to know yes or no. I believe so. Okay, well, cool. We'll chill because we're going to watch the video and then we'll just see. We'll just see. Let's see. What you got for me, Cav?
Didn't say a bad thing about the guy.
It just feels wrong to like Ethan said, to glamorize something like that, because that's just a dangerous idea.
That's my point, and I feel like that's a converse. That's at least, even if you disagree, a good place to have to get indignant over and to call me a Zionist. Mm-hmm. If you call me a Zionist, you're an anti-Semite. You know why? Because I'm not a fucking Zionist. I made that exact profoundly, deeply clear. So when you see someone on Twitter, when you see someone in the audience calling me a Zionist, what the
so what? Super chatted. Do a spin. Okay. Do a little spin because I think it's fun though. Nice to see you. Thanks for the 2. Appreciate you. So what? Now do a flip.
They're calling me as a Jew. Mm-hmm. Because that's the only goddamn thing that means at that point.
As people on the left, I guess we like to believe there are causes we believe in so strongly we would actually die for. I know there's definitely things I feel like I believe in so strongly I would die for. But would we actually? And it's a question like a lot of us might be thinking about recently with the sacrifice of Aaron Bushnell. And I don't know about you guys, but I can relate to him in many ways. Like, I wouldn't do what he did. And I'll keep it real, for multiple reasons, I wouldn't do that. But I can relate to the frustration. I can relate to the disgust. I can relate to just the feeling of, I have to do something. And, you know, I've been to the protests. I've made loads of YouTube videos. I've been making videos on Israel for, you know, years and years at this point. And it seems like it just gets worse. Nothing gets done. And with that frustration, like, what can I do as an individual? And in that sense, I totally respect what he did, because he used his position as someone in the biggest imperialist military in the entire world, which props up a system that oppresses most of us. They're the key architect of the capitalist system, which also means groups like the Palestinian become sacrificial lambs for capitalism. All the Arab states don't care because they're friends of Israel. Why? Because it benefits them to be pro-Western, pro-American, and by default, you've got to be pro-Israeli. Why do you think groups like the Saudis are even doing that recently? And in that, this whole prison we've created for ourselves, we just have to watch in 4K as a group of people get utterly decimated, destroyed, and have a genocide done against them by a nation state which resembles many colonial nation states, very similar to the United States, very
true. I want to skip to some parts of him talking about the specific statements. We don't watch the whole video.
Ethan Klein doesn't have nuance on this issue because it's not the Israeli government alone. Every single Israeli government has done this. Every single Israeli political party supports this. Most Israeli Jews support what's going on. I've shown polls from January where 95% say that they support what's going on or they want more of it. 40%, over 40% want more of it. Like, it's a deeply unwell society, deeply unwell, gripped by fascism, and it's continuously gotten worse and worse since its establishment, where it's at its probably most right-wing fascist peak, where you have basically a whole group of the population just frothing at the mouth for genocide, and even though it's been going on for months, they still like it. So I'll get more into my thoughts on Ethan Klein's comments in a sec, including him saying that anyone who calls him a Zionist is just wanting to call him a Jew, which, if I'm going to be super charitable, he fundamentally doesn't understand like what Zionism really means. He seems to conflate it with supporting everything the Israeli government does right now, which it definitely doesn't mean that. So just before we go any further, this happened a couple days ago, but I was waiting until I made a more like Israel-specific video to shout this out. But basically, you know, my girlfriend, she wrote an interview with a crew in Gaza who ran a dance school for children. And it was one of the few places that they could find a welcome break from just, you know, actually living through a genocide. I'm sad to report, the school was actually bombed by Israel and 2 of the children died as well. So an update from their GoFundMe, which I'm going to link. Please go check this out. They need the resources still. They posted on the 28th. Tragic news, support needed. We are writing with a heavy heart to inform you that yesterday our dance school was bombed. The Camp Breakers dance school. Many children were killed and injured, including several of our family members. We are in despair. Rania and Tota, aged 9 and 5, were both killed along with their parents. They were happy students with big dreams. We are asking if anyone may be able to help with additional contributions to help repairing the damage or to share with your networks. We are increasing the fundraising target by $65 to $100,000. This will allow us to rebuild our studio and continue to support our students through activities and future workshops. Please help by donating or sharing with your networks every.
You know, the craziest thing about this is that these are some of the only activities that these kids can do besides just becoming a militant in Gaza. So, I mean, it was talked about in the ICJ case how Israel is destroying Gaza's past, their present, and their future as well. It's also like a big reason for why they supported Hamas to be in power in the first place. Help discredit their past, their present, and their future. I didn't take any time to do this, but thank you so much, Anonymous, for the 5 gifted subs. Thank you so much again for another gifted sub. I do really appreciate you for that. Thank you so much for the for the love. Thank you so much. Thank you. Six before, six. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Anon.
Against China. And I wrote this in a comment on the actual podcast. Don't know if I ever read this, but they might, because they might get the notification because I have, over 100,000 subscribers. I said, fundamentally, everything he said there shows no respect for the cause he died for. It's just, I respect his conviction to burn alive. We shouldn't glamorize that. And he did it well because, I don't know, he stood for long. I know he's like an edgy comedian, but it's just a gross joke. And I get sometimes, as a comedian, you're pushing the boundaries. He made a joke later on when the mic was messing up, saying it's the ghost of Aaron Bushnell haunting us. In my opinion, it's so tasteless, especially because of some of the stuff he said in the past. And it just really minimizes everything this guy did. Because if you do respect his principles and his conviction, I don't think you'd be making this joke. And he does address this. I'm going to get into him addressing these comments. And the fundamental point of everything he said there is he can't empathize at all with what Aaron did because he doesn't care. And I said this in my comment to him as well on YouTube.
Ethan's a comedian. He considers himself a comedian. Here's the thing. I actually disagree with this point. I think you can make that joke and also care. I absolutely think that you can make that joke and also care. The problem comes in is when you make that joke and also not follow it up with the context around you specifically showing genuine reverence and showing respect for what he did. Besides, damn, he really burned himself alive. That's crazy. He stood that whole time, right? I think the problem comes in is that this is compounded on top of the other statements that he's made that made people angry with him. I feel like I or like someone else could make this type of joke back because that would be backed up by the type of statements that we have made before, like beforehand. It's basically what it is. It's how I would consider it is that it's an aggravating factor. It's an aggravating factor for what's going on. I don't think it's not bad in and of itself. Change it to specific people, and obviously it becomes better or worse for specifically what it is, right? As somebody who specifically his job is to be funny, bring brevity to more serious situations, you can make a joke like that without it being as bad, but to have the surrounding context that would make it more funny to make people want to even laugh a little bit, right? Because if he said that joke, is that the ghost of Aaron Burnell, and then he talked about he's even fighting in the afterlife to save Gaza, like stuff like that. I feel like surrounding it with stuff like that, I feel like people would be more apt to laugh instead of just get mad at him. But obviously he doesn't like what he did that much. Not necessarily at the protesting, but more about like the act itself. He has more criticisms about that. So obviously that coupled with even more criticism makes it less funny, or even not funny.
YouTube, I don't think he cares about Palestine at all. I think because his audience lean left, he's paid lip service, and as we're going to see, he's saying, I'm saying all the things. I'm saying it's genocide, I'm saying it's apartheid, but you calling me a Zionist, that's too far, you're basically just calling me a Jew. And again, fundamentally, I think it shows he just wants to be left alone. Don't criticize me for believing Israel should exist. He's just getting really mad. He's getting so much criticism for his takes that he thinks are very, very rational. And one more thing I want to note is a lot of people like Ethan, not that he said it.
Is Ethan being criticized for thinking Israel should exist? I don't know. Because I think even that isn't, because even I think that Israel just specifically shouldn't be allowed to exist. Even if a two-state solution, specifically a two-state solution is not something that's even worth considering. I believe that's even a minority position within the pro-Palestinian movement and even the more fervent pro-Palestinian movement, right? I feel like that's even a more minority position, that even a two-state solution is not worth that. The idea that Israel should cease to exist, and even in that, then the people who are Jewish or Israeli should then be extradited or even be cleansed from the land, and then Palestinians should be able to come back, and then a Palestinian state should be just do reverse Nakba, right? I feel like that's even a more minority position. I don't think he's necessarily being even criticized for that, really. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think that's the main criticism against him right now. Because I feel like most of the people who are criticizing him would agree with a two-state solution, if possible. One secular state for all. Yeah. I think it's pretty clear that he gets hate because he's not unironically towing the line. because aesthetically pro-Palestinian rhetoric. So people begin with so he's not championing Palestine. He must be pro-Israel, and then he reacts poorly. I think it's a couple things, like his poor reactions, and also calling some people calling out people who may not fit under the label of being just like anti-Semitic, right? I think that's like the big crux of all of that, and not like him believing that an Israeli state should exist, or has a right to exist, or can exist. You can make the argument that keeping Israel as an ethno-state while creating a sovereign Palestinian state is still supporting Zionism. Well, if your argument is that Israel should be kept as a should be kept as an ethno state, sure. But if you don't like the idea of Israel being an ethno state, but Israel as a country as it exists, well, Israel as a country, it is possible for it to continue to exist, even though you disagree with policies enacted by Israel. That could be a policy, that could be a position that somebody could hold, right? That wouldn't technically be Zionist. No state solution. I still like my no state solution personally. You know, I think it's the most big brain it's the most big brain giga brain sheen, you know, like massive brain floating on the chair above the masses opinion. Just like dissolve a state and just have it be controlled by the UN, and everybody gets a right to return, even me. Everybody in the world gets the right to return. Because we're all God's children. Yeah, and we'll name it Abraham. So true. Cain something God's plan praise. So true.
In the quotes I read, they're saying it's all because of mental health problems. Like, this guy wasn't well. Because you can't be mentally sound and do this. I mean, apparently if you're a monk you can, but if you're just an average guy in the military, you can't. And I would say you can. Plenty of things done in history which seem extraordinary or taken too far or extreme to us, they were done by people with totally sound minds. And loads of people in revolutionary movements or in war can go watch it, because he did say it. I'm going to watch it right now. Have to resort to extreme measures to even put a bit of pressure on these governments. So let's listen to Ethan address it. I'm going to play you like a fair bit, maybe 4 minutes or something. It is from like a hours long podcast. If I start talking about something he didn't say, I'll link the video. You guys can go watch it because he did say it. I'm going to watch it right now for about like 8 or 10 minutes, and then I'm going to react to it.
I guess some people are mad that I said suicide bad. So, another hot take from Ethan Klein, the Zionist genocide supporter. They're mad about my comments about Aaron Bushnell on the See You Next Tuesday. My point was this. I think you should be careful about how you romanticize suicide, because it's going to encourage more people to do it. That was my take. And that apparently enraged people. Unless I'm misunderstanding, tell me why. I'd love to know why. It's really annoying that like people they stand by, like just waiting for any reason to call me, and by the way, call me a Zionist, make it about how I support genocide, about all this horrible shit, to call me racist. Why? Because I made one stupid, insensitive joke that, by the way, they didn't call his character into question. It literally was just like, he was really good. And my point was that, like, his resolve was crazy. And the thing that, really struck me about that video was how he stood there.
That was my first reaction.
And I was like, wow, I didn't even think that anybody could do that. So, I mean, I don't know how to talk about that, but his resolve was incredible. And what I said was, he's really good at burning alive. And I mean that as the most sincere compliment possible. He really is.
And it's obviously also a really dark, like, humoristic way to look at it.
So how are you going to take that and call me a racist, a genocidal, a monster? I mean, if you're coming at me with those kinds of takes, you are ensuring peace will never happen. Because you can't even have you can't even have any kind of dialogue where everybody isn't walking totally alone.
I mean, this is that's a weird, like, bro, if you criticize me for this joke, there will never be peace in the Middle East. Yo, listen, if you criticize me for my meme, you are destroying peace in the Middle East, man. Come on. Listen, I don't know. Listen, you can just be upset that people got mad at you, and you could think that they're wrong, but like, I don't think this is like hampering peace in the Middle East, brother. I don't think this is what'll do it. I mean, you have to admit, like, even the thing that even the thing that he was doing, which is like, you know, possibly even minimizing or like don't romanticize, would be more by getting people to which would get people to be more likely to dismiss what he did in the Palestinian movement and the Palestinian movement and their wants and wishes than just being like, hey dude, bad joke, right?
Aligned with you. I never said a single bad thing about that man, other than the compliment, not even the compliment because it's weird to say, but his resolve is nuts. His resolve was really remarkable. That's what I said. And that's what the joke was. If you can't deal with it, then, you know, you're a hypocrite, because I make these jokes about all different topics, about all different sensitive things, about all different groups of people, every show. And then when it lightly brushes on your shoulder, you freak the fuck out and you bitch and you cry and you go and you try to find any reason to you know what I mean, to get angry. Give me a break. Look in the mirror, loser. You're the problem. You are the problem.
Him like playing some sort of victim. You made the joke, dude. I know you did it and thought you were in like some private safe space where you could really say what you think, but you made the joke. So take the heat. You made a gross joke about someone who died for their convictions, a principled man who died for his convictions. Don't care if you agree with it or not. If you actually respected what he did, like you said you did, you wouldn't have made these gross jokes.
Yeah, we said that. We saw that.
For calling me.
I did actually see that. I hope you don't dislike me skipping around. I did actually just literally say that when we watched it originally.
A racist, calling me a genocidal, a Zionist, which by the way, Zionist is just another slur for Jew, being a Jew. You know how many people now calling every Jew a Zionist? It's like, okay, just call me a Jew and get it over with. Call me the K word, at least I'll know what you mean. It's just the truth. Not everybody, not all the time, but a lot of times, let's not pretend that anti-Semitism isn't a massive inferno of acceptable behavior right now on the left and the right. Nazis and leftists are dabbing the up, saying Zionists, you know, and, you know.
I'm not sure if I would say anti-Semitism is specifically, I wouldn't say anti-Semitism is like so, it's like so passable right now, especially with, I've seen, I don't know, maybe it's just me, I've seen a lot of movements recently like kick out a lot of people who've said things pretty anti-Semitic, right? I've seen people like criticize but sympathize with people who've said things that toe the line, right? I've seen that before, but he may get mad at that, which you can get mad at that, whatever. But I haven't seen somebody be like, boy, I like wake up and be like, boy, I hate Jews. I can't wait to hate a Jew today, boy. Like I've never, and then people go like, woo, woo. I've never seen that before. In my personal opinion, is it out there? I mean, probably. I mean, there's probably something like that out there. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like there aren't evil people who say terrible things on the internet. I'm not stupid. But I just personally haven't seen that, like nearly as much. I've seen a lot of conservatives, I've seen a lot of conservatives recently, like re-up their like anti-George Soros. I've seen people like I've seen people like Charlie Kirk, but I feel like I've seen people like Charlie Kirk talk specifically about how we need to, how they need to talk about how they need to be careful of the duplicitous Jewish organization who works for DIE and civil rights, who's using Israel's power to subvert democracy or whatever, right? I've seen conservatives say stuff like that recently, and even want to distance themselves from like from not like Israeli but specifically Jewish organizations because they think that they're far left monsters working for like the Great Replacement or whatever, like actually just doing just straight up anti-Semitic talking points like all the time. I've seen a lot of that stuff personally, and that's actually just a mainstream talking point for conservative. This is like a mainstream talking point for conservative. Christian Zionists are inherently anti-Semitic. The talking point that I hate the most is that people say, and Biden says it a lot, like he says like no Jew would be safe if Israel didn't exist. Some of the most bum ass cuck shit I've ever heard in my entire life. The United States is like, outside of Israel, the United States holds the #1 Jewish population in the entire country, and Jews in this country are safer than they are in Israel, and honestly ever have been. More Jewish people die, and a higher percentage of Jewish people die in Israel due to anti-Semitism and also like crimes against them than the United States. Like, kind of period. It's crazy to me. If that statement would be true, it'd be way more true about the United States than Israel.
Again, it's driving me insane. I gotta talk about it. You know, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like there's just not a tidal wave of anti-Semitism gobbling up the entire discourse. It's fucking disgusting, man. And I'm doing, as an Israeli dual citizen, as someone who's deeply invested.
I would say maybe there's like an undercurrent of anti-Semitism. Like, I think it's there, right? I think, like, well, once again, I think there are genuinely people who are like actually pretty anti-Semitic. Oh, one of the big people, Bad Empanada, like that content creator, bro, actually believes that everybody who is Israeli should be like extrajudiciously like executed by Hamas. Like that guy actually believes that all Jews in Israel should die. Like I think that's the only person that I've like near the left who I've seen genuinely believes that like all civilians, men, women, and children in Israel, and anybody who's been to Israel, anybody who even thinks that Israel there's a possibility for Israel as a state to even exist, should simply just be executed. Right? Like that, I think that's the only person who I've seen say, who's like on the left, say something like that before.
In the state of Israel, who's probably more sympathetic to the Israeli perspective than most people would be. I've tried so hard to pull myself to some kind of central ground where we can have a real conversation about this stuff. I'm pulled myself.
Okay, here's my thing. Who's we? Okay, who is we? Is it like people on Twitter who are being mean to you? Who is we? Or is it like people in your comment section? Like, who is we? Like, who's we here? Because there's probably, they usually average around like 40,000 viewers or something. There are probably like 30,000 viewers in there who completely agree with him and think people are being too mean to him. I just do not believe that there's like his entire community that he's talking about when he says we. Does he? Because I think what he means we is like some guy on Twitter that hates him. There's some lefty on Twitter who has the watermelon emoji in their name, who's named Free Palestine, Free Palestine Now, who their number one word used in the last like 4 months is the word like settler colonial. Sorry, the number one term is settler colonial. Who absolutely hates this man's guts. But that's just kind of like who's we here, man? That's what I want to know. Who's he talking to? Is he talking to people on Twitter who don't like him? Because it just seems like to me that there are way more people who are agreeing, way more people who are either sympathetic to him or agreeing with him than people who don't like him. And also he said he was going to stop talking about this, but he's just chosen not to. And it seems like it's just making his life worse. We? Bro, speaking French. Yeah, who's we? Who's we? I just want to know. I mean, it seemed like Cav doesn't like him, so maybe this guy. It seemed like Cav really doesn't like this guy. So maybe.
All the way to, outright saying that it's apartheid, that it's genocide, that the Israeli government is committing. And so, but you still want to call me a racist and a genocide and a Zionist. Why would you call me a Zionist if it wasn't just, oh, you're a Jew? When I have said all the things that you want to hear from me, I'm not going to sit here and let my people, be openly bigoted and racist. That shit. Nobody would expect that from any other minority. Nobody. And I'm here. I'm with you. I'm on your side all the way. I'm on your side as much as I possibly can be. And instead of, holding hands and having a real conversation, you spit my face and you call me a Zionist to get, indignant over and to call me a Zionist. Mm-hmm. If you call me a Zionist, you're an anti-Semite. You know why? Because I'm not a fucking Zionist and I've made that.
Grifters who are using Palestine to actually push anti-Semitism. My whole channel, I would say, maybe like a third of my content is dedicated to anti-fascist stuff, which usually centers around focusing my research and efforts on exposing like terrible anti-Semitism, which nearly always comes from the right wing. People like, Jordan Peterson. For ages, I've been talking about how he's motivated by anti-Semitism. Elon Musk. All these massive figures. That's the face of anti-Semitism. And also, what unites all of them, they're pro-Israel. Because most anti-Semites these days who pose a danger to Jewish people are actually pro-Israel. I know that might blow your mind because also, Ethan, There's a group called Christian Zionists, and they're very powerful in America. They actually made up most of Trump's administration and Bush's. They actually love Israel. Do you know why they love Israel? Because it's the key to Armageddon, where all the Jews will die unless they convert to Christianity, right? So when people say Ethan Klein is a Zionist, sure, will there be people who hate him because he's Jewish and they're trying to use it as something to hide? Sure, there are people like that. I would say probably most of them are conservative. But yeah, maybe there's some leftists who don't like Jewish people either. But
a lot of them also like Israel because of the same reason for why a lot of them like that Return to Africa movement for black people back in the day, where they're like, oh shit, we can get them out of here. I mean, there's a reason why the KKK was working with like Marcus Garvey to be able to help get black people out of the country. Yeah, out of the country, right? I mean, what like a KKK leader said, if like blacks want to leave the country, I'll carry them on my back to Africa. Right? Like there's lots of reasons why they support Israel in that way, right? There's a couple of different people. There's people who hate. There's people who hate Jews, okay, because they think that they're controlling the world or something. And then there are people who kind of like Jews because they think that they're controlling the world and they think that's admirable. And there's people who hate Jews because they think that they're controlling the world and it's admirable, but they want to be able to do it instead of them. Yeah, there's a convenient way to get. Yeah, minorities hate this simple trick.
fundamentally, you being a Zionist is not about you supporting the government right now. Originally, Zionism, the dominant form of Zionism that created the State of Israel, was left-wing Zionism, socialist Zionism. It's a reason that why so many socialist groups used to support Israel. The whole of the communist bloc supported Israel. Ho Chi Minh was friends with Ben Gurion. Stalin sent weapons through Czechoslovakia to the Israelis for the creation of their state, right? Irish Republican socialists used to support Israel over the Arabs because there was a massive deal of racism tied up in that, but also socialist anti-imperialism. They viewed it as well as the Jews reclaiming their homeland against the evil British Empire and also Palestinians, right? And the people involved in the peace process in the 90s were left-wing Zionists. Being a Zionist is not us saying to you, oh my God, do you support Netanyahu and genocide? But if I say to you, Israel has no right to exist as a settler colonial apartheid state, the same way Northern Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, they have no right to exist. Would you agree with that sentiment? Would you agree with the sentiment that you can't just group together, go to someone else's country, create like an apartheid regime that you rule, and now say it belongs to you? That's not okay, is it? It wasn't okay when the American settlers and government did it. It's not okay when the British Empire did it. It's just not okay, right? It's not okay in Vietnam with the French. So if you agree with that, then surely you must agree with Israel that that's not okay and it shouldn't exist and it should be one secular state for everyone. Even if you want to tell me the reality is more complicated, which I would agree because most of Israeli society is supporting the genocide right now, of course, yeah, I realise that. But in theory, that's what we're talking about. So if you say, no, in theory, I reject that, Israel has a right to exist, built on stolen land and built on land it's constantly expanded upon for years and years. If people call you a Zionist for that, they're right. Zionism takes many shapes and different forms. You can be a right-wing religious Zionist, you can be an atheist, leftist, socialist Zionist, you can be a Christian far-right extremist Zionist, you can be all these different things. Someone saying that to you because you support the Israeli state to whatever extent doesn't mean they're just calling you a Jew and they're trying to be anti-Semitic. So Ethan, when you're making light of someone's ultimate sacrifice to end the genocide of the Palestinians and to end Israeli apartheid and colonialism, and then people call you a gross Zionist afterwards, they're not calling you a Jew necessarily, right? They're not calling you something anti-Semitic. They're saying, well, only someone with this mentality could think what he did was like stupid and not empathise with the cause. Because if you care about freedom and justice, like sincerely, and I know you say these things because it seems like it's transactional to you. You say, well, I've said the things. I've said the good things and you won't leave me alone. I've said it's apartheid and you're still giving me shit. How could you do that? I said it, but you don't believe it, do you? Do you seriously believe Israel is an apartheid state? Because by extension, you're going to have to believe it's some sort of colonial state that shouldn't exist, right? But I don't think you believe that. So you're just saying it because you know your audience want to hear it. And
okay, so that's an incredibly negative way to be able to take what he believes, right? And I think that's a lot of what he's talking about is that, oh, I say it. Okay, so you say something, but then people are mad at you. Yeah, there's an incredibly uncharitable way to take what he's saying. I think he could just genuinely be mad that people are mean to him. After, like, do you not believe that somebody can be like, I agree with you on these issues. Why are you still mad at me, right? You don't believe that somebody can believe those two things, or somebody can like hold those two positions that I believe the same things as you. Why are you still upset at me for seemingly reasons that would come back to me believing these things that I've already told you that I believe, right? It seems like you could understand how somebody could feel that way, right? Don't you? I think so. It seems understandable to me. Now, whether or not he knows it, I don't know. Okay, you can never tell what's exactly in somebody's head. All you can do is try to infer what they believe by their actions that they take. I've seen Ethan donate to Palestinian causes. I've seen Ethan have a show with Hassan and have like have these types of talks about it where he's agreed with a lot of things that Hassan has said. I've seen these types of things, right? I don't know exactly what he believes. Maybe every single belief that he has is just transactional, and the only reason why he stopped saying the N-word is because he thought that he could make more money and not because he thought that it was wrong to do so, right? I don't know. I can't tell, right? So we can question that all day long, but I feel like it's not really going to get us anywhere unless one of us during this conversation puts together a thought reading machine where I can completely see everybody's opinions inside of their head and be able to tell concretely with 100% accuracy whether or not they genuinely believe something for authentic reasons, and if those reasons are necessarily that good. I don't know. What I can say is that he said other things that I believe that people can find issues with. And I think that's what a lot of people are getting upset at him with, are those other things that he said that may be problematic, and not simply because of the other stuff. I think there are a lot of people who haven't heard that other stuff that he said. I think there's a lot of people who are criticizing him who haven't heard that other stuff that he said, who can be like, oh, who can be mad at him, right? Hear that he said those types of things and be like, I'm glad that he said this, but what about that over there? That's still worth being upset at him at. And then it all comes in, and then it all gets turned into this one amalgamation of why everyone's so mean to me. And that's just how he looks at the whole issue. I don't think Ethan is a Zionist. He wouldn't be so big mad. He wouldn't be so big mad being accused that he is one if he cared. Like, on the surface, that would make sense, but also you got to understand there are also people who still believe that, who try to like put on an air of like trying to not be something that they are. It's like those Nazi. It's like when you call somebody a Nazi for saying something, you know, Nazi-ish, and then they go, oh, everybody who you don't like is a Nazi, and then you pull up a tweet of them praising Adolf Hitler for killing Jewish people, right? And then and then you're like, what are you talking about, right? Like, obviously that type of stuff exists, but I feel like I personally like to be more charitable than that. I guess Cav just doesn't. I personally like to be more charitable, right? I mean, think about it, right? The people, the parents who hate to be called bad parents the most are the people who are actually bad parents, right? So there's lots of types of people out there who would still be that way. So just because he's mad doesn't mean that, you know, he's not that, right? But also then you could say, like, obviously nobody wants to think of themselves as like the bad person. So that last example might not be as apt, but I think the first one would be. What icks me about this is Ethan centering his feelings. Like, I get it, but bruh, sure, I mean, yeah, you could definitely feel that way about how he's centering himself in this instead of talking about the issue at hand. But they are pretty personal attacks that there are personal attacks that are going on here about how bad and terrible he is. So I guess you can understand that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. If you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button. If you don't, it'll make Boo very sad. I know a bunch of you who are watching are not subscribed. Join the frenzy. You won't regret it. Thank you, Boo.